Welcome back to Red Cedar Radar. A little bit later this week, but things happen. I have my very good friend and colleague Ryan on today to talk all things recruiting, kind of is his focus these days, but we're going to go into some other topics as well and kind of chat about some different topics that are kind of in the forefront of everyone's mind with everything that's been going on with the football team and kind of some recent news across college basketball as well. How are you today, Ryan?
I'm doing well. Made it to the end
Okay,
of the week.
right, which is most important. So tell me a little bit more about what you do for Spartans Illustrated. I know you've been on the pod before, and you've explained it before, but kind of give me a quick rundown again, just if people don't know.
Better question to ask might be what don't I do? And just I kind of run the day to day of the site. Obviously David Harns is our publisher, and he trusts me to kind of edit all the articles, publish all the articles, format them. Kind of how we have them showing up on the homepage. All just day to day site administration. I'm also the lead writer, whether that be for recruiting, team stuff, basketball, football, other sports, breaking news, things like that. Or,
Yeah.
if I can't write it, I'm responsible most of the time for getting it coordinated for somebody else to do it. Recruiting is a huge thing now with reaching out to kids, talking to people, getting, trying to follow all of these different recruits that, MSU's offering 400 plus kids a year. So it gets tough to
Mm-hmm.
keep up with everything, especially with everything else I have going on. But, it's exactly where I want to be and what I want to be doing. And, I'm very thankful for David for giving me this opportunity. And, love working with you, love working with the team. So it's very busy. There's always
Yeah.
something going on. There's a lot more travel for me nowadays than there used to be with different
Mm-hmm.
camps and events and games and things like that. But it's all great experiences and something that I really cherish.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Spartans Illustrated, the start of everything, and kind of where we are now, wouldn't be where it is without your dedication to wanting the site to be its best. And I feel like that should be acknowledged. So just putting
Appreciate
that
that.
out there.
I know you
Yeah.
guys
So
feel
one other
like
thing,
detail sometimes, but
well, no, I appreciate it, even if in the moment I roll my eyes.
fair
But
enough.
we don't have to talk about that. Just kidding. So I haven't talked a lot about Spartans Illustrated on the pod because we've kind of had some different guests that aren't always so much affiliated with the site. Talk to me or talk to the listeners a little bit more about all the different things that we cover on Spartans Illustrated, just to give like a quick rundown of a list of things.
So obviously, being a part of the Rivals Network, being a Rivals affiliate, our big thing is recruiting and, keeping up with all things Michigan State recruiting, whether that be talking to kids after they get offers, after visits, keeping track of who's visiting unofficially and officially, who's committing, getting to talk to these kids, getting quotes from them, getting their insights on why they like Michigan State, what stands out to them, and, just kind of promoting Michigan State recruiting and everything that's going on there and how that process is. And then, obviously we cover all of the team stuff. Football is obviously the biggest thing, and men's basketball, but that's not all we cover. Like, obviously those are going to take up the majority of news and articles and stuff is football and basketball and recruiting. But what our site does really well, and I think, probably the most comprehensive Michigan State coverage out there, is that we're also covering women's golf, gymnastics, women's basketball, hockey, pretty much, baseball we do every week too. And pretty much every Michigan State sport that we are able to find the time to cover, whether that be in a full article or even just in our forum, sharing threads or sharing different Michigan State press releases or anything, even if it's like wrestling, track and field, softball, whatever, that is covered to some degree on our site, when we're able to do that. And I think that's important because obviously, football, basketball, those are the athletes who get a lot of the attention. But all of these other sports, the non-rev sports and things like that, these student athletes work just as hard, and they go through the same struggles and the same triumphs. And really, what our goal is here is to tell the stories of Michigan State student athletes and recruits, and I think that's what we do a really good job of.
I would agree. I would say, I mean, our coverage of those big sports, football, basketball, is fantastic. But something I like the best about our site is that we cover everything else also, or at least start a conversation on the forums about everything else. So I think you summed that up perfectly. And I think if you listen to the Red Cedar Radar podcast and you haven't taken a look into subscribing to Spartans Illustrated, I would definitely recommend it. And I'm not biased. I really do think that the coverage that we do comprehensively is really some of the best. So
Absolutely. And, on top of all that, we're also at all the press conferences for, Tom Izzo, Mel Tucker, the different
mhm.
various assistant coaches, players, etc. So we're getting all of those quotes and written down and, keeping up with it on social media or on the website or whatever. So,
Yeah,
follow us
definitely.
and subscribe to us for all of that coverage.
Yeah. Down below, I have linked all of our social media in the description of the episode. So if you want to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, all those places, check it out in the description below. Okay, Ryan, let's switch gears here. I want to talk basketball news. We know, and I've discussed on the pod before, Hogard and Akins in the NBA draft. What were your initial opinions about kind of those two decisions before I ask more in depth questions?
Based on the way it went down, there was chatter, right, with Akins that he was likely going to enter the process, get NBA feedback, and see how it goes. So that wasn't surprising to me at all to see him enter his name. I've always felt more of a vibe of that's what he was doing, was to go in and get feedback, talk to people. Tom Izzo will talk to people for him too, and just kind of see where he stands on NBA draft boards. So he didn't end up getting an NBA Combine invite, and neither did AJ Hogard. So I don't know. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's automatically coming back to Michigan State, but it just kind of shows that likely, that's exactly what he was after, is just seeing where he stood. And if he doesn't like where he stood, he's likely to come back to Michigan State. I don't know exactly what he's thinking right now, if he's going to come back or what, but I think once he didn't get the G League combine invite, and he didn't get the NBA one. I think maybe he got feedback on what he needs to improve upon, and really that'd be a win-win for Michigan State if he were to return, because he's going to be extra motivated to work his way onto the draft boards next season, and he's going to give his all to Michigan State to try to improve in those areas and show that he's um, able to take that feedback in stride, work work on it, and take that kind of next step up in his game. So, and again, just because he didn't get the combine invite doesn't mean that he's automatically come back to college. He could be talking to other people, and even if he doesn't get drafted, maybe he would be open to being an undrafted free agent, something like that. But yeah, I always felt that that was more of his goal, was just to get feedback from the NBA. And with AJ Hogard, his was a lot more surprising. He didn't publicly announce it until after the fact, after the NBA's early entrant draft list came out and his name was on there, and people were surprised by that. A lot of people did not see that coming, and I think he's kind of in the same boat where I want to go enter this process, dip my toe in the water, see what NBA scouts, coaches, GMs, people connected to the league think about me and my game. Take that feedback, come back to East Lansing maybe, and work on improving that. And again, who knows what he's actually thinking? Who knows if he's actually going to return? But yeah, with both of those guys, it always felt like at least the door was open for them to return. And and if they both return, that Michigan State team next year, 23, 24 is going to be absolutely loaded, and expectations are going to be sky high. So we'll see what they end up doing. And like I said, I always looked at it as kind of a win-win for Michigan State because, and for the players themselves, because from MSU side of things, you're either getting, another player in the NBA, or they're getting all this feedback, like I said, and they're able to use that to their advantage for your team at the college level next year. And then, for the players themselves, they're either NBA players or they know exactly what they need to improve on. So for me, I think it always makes sense for players of their caliber to go and test the process at least and see what, that they're, see what kind of feedback they get, and then take that and get better.
Yeah, I would agree. And something that I think maybe it was Paul last week, touched on how the team is bringing in some young guys that are bringing in a lot of hype, but they are young guys still. And so having these guys going and getting feedback from that next level is kind of something that they can bring back and then use when they're bringing in those new guys to the team and kind of build off of those suggestions, which not that Izzo needs help with his coaching, but I don't think that that's a negative. I think that's I think it's a net positive as far as next season with the hype around it as well.
Yeah, senior AJ Hogard running the team as a point guard is going to be huge for the Spartans if he returns, because he has all that experience, and he's going to be able to teach a guy like Jeremy Fears Jr. He's been through this already. This is the process. This is how you have to work. This is what you do it. And obviously, there's been talk about how AJ hasn't always bought in, and that was a big thing with Izzo is trying to get him to do certain things in a certain way, and they, and as I was mentioned, that they butt heads about that a lot. But at the end of the day, I think Hogard is really willing to do that kind of stuff. I think maybe he gets, that video came out where he looked uninterested on the bench talking to Izzo and stuff. But I've talked to Hogard a lot in the locker room and things like that, and I really don't actually get that vibe from him. I think he does want to do what's best for the team and Izzo and stuff. I just think sometimes they have a little different opinions on certain things. But I really think that, he kind of holds the key to how successful that team will be, because like you said, they're bringing in a lot of freshmen with the hype, but those freshmen don't have the experience. We don't know until they get to campus and start playing how they'll actually perform at the college level. And, I think Akins, he was affected by that foot injury early on, came on really strong toward the end of the year, was, a knockdown shooter from three. I think, if he comes back next year, he's going to want to have the ball in his hands a little more. And, that gets kind of hard to figure out exactly how that's going to go with Tyson Walker coming back and the freshmen coming in, and, everybody else who's returning. But I think, I would trust Tom Izzo, who's one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time, and his staff to figure that all out, keep everybody happy, figure out the best rotation for them, get everybody their touches. And, if those guys do come back, that's, like I said, going to be a really strong team. And I think that you made a good point that it's going to have a great balance of youth and, veteran experience.
So I want to switch gears for a second, staying within college basketball, but kind of to a topic that has been on my mind a lot recently. And I know that I talked about it last week in the pod, but I want to talk about it a little more in depth with you. So Hunter Dickinson, we found out, he announced in the weirdest way possible with a weird video, that he's transferring to Kansas. And he released a statement that kind of was talking about his motivations to leave Michigan. We all know how their season went and how things are going for them over there. But he talked a lot about how, like, the money that he was making was less than six figures, and that's not kind of what he wanted. So he made the change. I don't want to say based off that, but that was a part of his decision. And that kind of got me thinking a lot about NIL deals and where athletes are at now in this process, and using our own kind of football news is as an example of this, with Keon Coleman kind of going, and it's seemingly being that the money is part of his decision with this, from what I've read. Who's to say? I don't know him, but that's just kind of speculation. I want to know your opinions, Ryan, on the way that NIL deals are working for athletes now. And then I'll kind of give you some follow up questions based off your answers. What are your opinions on that system and kind of how it's working as of right now?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, right? I fully support that players should be able to make money off their name, image, and likeness, but it's kind of taken on this life of its own, right? Because there's no real guardrails as to NIL rules. When this stuff first came out, it was supposed to be, you can't use NIL money to buy players or recruits, transfer players to come to your team. Um, and, you can't use it in any way for like on court or on the field. And really, though, there's the NCAA has not done anything to stop any of this, and that's why you're seeing
Mm-hmm.
these players who are demanding much money, these players who are transferring out because of money, and quite frankly, other schools tampering with players on current rosters that is completely against the rules, but nobody's doing anything to stop because that's just kind of the landscape of what it is now. When NIL first came out, I always thought it'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Players can do commercials, can go to events, can
Yeah.
do these kind of sponsorship things, make some money. Like that's awesome. Make designs like Darius Snow does and clothing, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's what NIL was meant for. And now it's become like an arms race in college football, right? And and college basketball too. And it's very, like I do not envy being a college coach in this landscape because how do you navigate through this? You have, not only now are you having to recruit players from high school ranks and, let them know about your NIL offerings every day. You're having to recruit your own players on your roster to keep them happy and to, because you have other people coming in, through back channels of other schools and saying like, come here and we'll offer you this. And um, that's just kind of what's going on. There was an article in the Athletic today about how group of five schools are just being picked apart because bigger Power Five teams are picking apart these group of five teams rosters and offering them money and reaching out to them and poaching them basically, and that's very there's already like a huge competitive disadvantage for these group of five schools, right? So, when you're taking their best players too, what are they supposed to do? And it's a lot of, like I said, like, how do you navigate through this as a coach, as an athletic department? How do you keep everybody happy at once, especially, on a football team where you have 85 scholarship players and not everybody's getting playing time too, but even your star players like Keon Coleman, are transferring out too, and whether that be for money or draft stock or whatever his reason may be, there's always now this threat of that happening, and I know that people kind of get mad at Tom Izzo's approach to the transfer portal and his thoughts on it. But the one thing that I think he's right about with that line of thinking is that it's not always the best for everybody involved. These kids always think, who are enter the portal might think that the grass is greener on the other side, but I think I read on ESPN that there were like 32 or 3,300 Division One FBS players who entered the portal since last August, and not all of those kids are going to find a landing spot. So then they just get stuck in the
Yeah.
portal, and I think there was something like 8,000 between Division One, Two, and Three kids who are in the portal right now, and not all of those kids are going to end up somewhere, and some it's going to work out for a lot of them, and it's not going to work out for all of them, but I think that those decisions should be based individually on what's best for them. I don't have any
Of
issue
course.
with the transfer portal itself. I don't have any issue with the rule that you can transfer one time and have immediate playing time. I think that's great. It's just that at some point, I do think there need to be more guardrails related to NIL and especially tampering and things like that, because right now it's just kind of the Wild West.
Yeah. I really liked what you said about coaches having to continuously recruit their own players on their team, like that are currently on their roster. And I think that always has had to happen. You have to get guys to buy in to stay around. But I feel like as we have seen just very recently, like that is something new that maybe I didn't latch onto before, but it's very prevalent now. Like you really have to keep them around, not just by having them buy into your program, but then also offering them those deals that they're looking for that other guys are getting, or else they'll go somewhere else. Okay, Ryan, I think you already touched on this a little bit in your answer there, but do you think this system of NIL deals and kind of the way that it's been working, like you said, kind of like the Wild West, do you think this is sustainable long term? Or do you think changes will have to be made to kind of put in place some more rules?
I would hope that some changes are made, some rules or guardrails are put in to kind of guide this. I guess it's as sustainable as people are willing to let it happen, right? A lot of schools have these collectives from very rich donors who are willing to put in money toward NIL and recruiting and different things like that. And as long as there are people who are willing to do that, then I guess they can get away with it for however long it takes before rules are put into place. But with that said, you look at examples like Florida and Miami and stuff, where a lot of times they're promising a lot of kids certain amount of money, and they don't end up actually having it, and then these kids are asking to get out of their NILs or end up transferring anyway because they were overpromised and underdelivered. So even with those collectives and with money raised, like it's still not always going to be sustainable. So I mean, no, in the long term, I don't really see how much this can actually go on for. But like I said, people will find ways to make it work, and it's kind of a mystery as to where this whole thing is going, and the whole landscape of college football with the transfer portal, with NIL, with all of that stuff is so different than even it was 2 or 3 years ago, and before NIL became a thing, and I think it was July 2021, and it's going to continue to evolve. Like I said, I support NIL. I support players being able to make money off of their name, image, and likeness and stuff. But what I don't really like is the adults in the room from different programs and stuff getting into these kids' heads and offering them all this money that, like I said, they might overpromise and underdeliver, and poaching players from other rosters. Like there's got to be something done about that aspect of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that take. There's good and bad with it all, but I think it kind of needs to be leveled out, and I think that may naturally happen over the next couple years. Um, but I think, yeah, I think there should be maybe some more barriers set up for the people that you said, the people that are maybe using the system in the way that it was not designed to be used. Okay, we can move on from this because I think I could talk about this all day, and I'm not really sure what I'm saying, but I want to talk about recruiting updates because that's something you've been working on a lot, as we touched on before. Um, you put out with another member of our team recruiting chops articles, and now they all have nice, beautiful new thumbnail graphics. I don't know who made those, but they're great.
Yes, good one.
Um, so, talk to me a little bit about recent news as far as recruiting goes, and then I want to get into some official visits that are coming up in June.
Yeah, I mean, the official visits are the biggest thing coming up. Right now, the coaches are on the road for evaluation periods, which means they're traveling through the country pretty much. All of the assistant coaches are spread out across the country, going to different high schools and talking to these kids' coaches. They're able to watch them work out and evaluate their tape and their their workouts. Quarterbacks will throw stuff like that. They can't have much contact with the kids themselves, but they're able to talk to the coaches, give out offers, talk to them on the phone through the coaches, stuff like that. So that's kind of what's going on right now. So you're seeing a lot of offers going out, and in the portal recently, Michigan State got two transfer defensive backs with Keon Stewart and Marion Smith. Smith from Cincinnati and Stewart from TCU. And those were much needed additions because Michigan State secondary is very young. The defensive backfield doesn't have a lot of depth to it, doesn't have a lot of experience. And that's why getting Charles Brantley back from the transfer portal, he entered his name in, right at the deadline, and then less than 48 hours decided that, Michigan State was a place that he wanted to stay. And, like I said, there's going to be a lot of youth in that secondary. So even if guys like Smith and Stewart aren't starting for MSU, they're going to push those younger guys. They're probably going to be part of that playing rotation or make an impact on special teams or ultimately start. But either way, it's a good scenario for Michigan State, right? Because you either got these two guys with some experience coming in who are going to play a lot of reps, or you have these younger guys who are beating them out in practice and looking better, and that and they can develop nicely. And I expect all those guys to kind of be in the mix there. I talked to Stewart after he was after he committed to MSU last weekend, and he said that Michigan State didn't they didn't sugarcoat anything for him. They were straight up like, you have an opportunity to come in and play here, but you have to earn that playing time yourself. Nothing's guaranteed, nothing's promised. And he really connected with the staff. He took a visit here, right? I think he announced his commitment on Saturday, and he right before that, he was on Michigan State's campus on Friday, and I think left early Saturday. He has 2 years of eligibility left. And Smith was a guy at Cincinnati who was getting some playing time more toward the end of his time there. And, he's another guy who can come in and provide some experience. So I think those are two kind of key guys to add. And like I said, at the very least, they're coming in to provide depth and competition. And at the very best, they're coming in to add, to be a starter, to make an impact on the defense. And, obviously a lot has been said about Michigan State's passing defense over the past couple of years. It struggled. And so adding those kind of guys into the mix is only going to help things there. And there were some losses for veteran guys in the defensive backfield with Xavier Henderson, Amir Speed, Ronald Williams. Those kind of guys. You got other guys returning with experience, and like I said, you got guys like Malik Spencer and Jaden Mangum and stuff who got some playing time as true freshmen. And we heard a lot of good things about this spring. They could end up being the starting safety duo back there, and other young guys like Dylan Tatum and Caleb Coley and players like that. So you mix those younger guys in with the two transfers, with returning guys like Brantley, like Angelo Gross, like Chester Kimbrough, who have some experience. And, overall, it's a very interesting mix. We'll see if MSU is able to improve there, or if they, are still going to struggle on that aspect. And, I know like another thing Stewart told me after he committed was he just felt a lot of love from the staff, and he felt a connection to Michigan State. He's a Houston, Texas kid, I believe. So he, is kind of looking for another home away from home. And he was playing behind some like All-American, All-Conference type players at TCU, and probably learned a lot from those guys. So I think he can come in and provide a lot of experience and knowledge to those younger guys.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't put this question on our little sheet here beforehand, but I'm going to put you on the spot. I apologize. What is your realistic opinion right now about how football season will go? Do you have one, or what are your takes at least?
I would say that the theme that really stood out to me throughout the spring, going to the media availabilities, talking to the players, talking to the coaches, this team is very hungry, very disappointed in what happened with 2022. Obviously, there were the injuries and the suspension and stuff, but at the end of the day, a lot of them point to it being a lack of execution, maybe some complacency after the success of 2021. Like, that's something that I don't think is going to be an issue at all with this 2023 team. Those guys are very motivated, and especially too when you saw Keon Coleman and Peyton Thorne enter the portal, a lot of the players and later were very vocal on social media saying like, I think Noah Kim said you're in good hands, Spartan Nation, and several other players were kind of hyping him up and hyping Caton Hauser up and hyping their team up overall. And, they have this big chip on their shoulder. And it kind of reminds me a lot of that team going into the 2021 season, that had very low expectations and then ended up having a really successful season. I think the depth has improved top to bottom. The starting positions, I don't know, how many of those have been upgraded with Coleman likely out. Wide receiver now becomes a question mark, but there's still a talented mix there. With Thorne out of the competition at quarterback, we don't know much about how Kim or Hauser are going to actually perform. And, obviously the play of the quarterback is what ultimately drives a lot of these success. And then, of course, the defense, which has really struggled, as I mentioned, over the past 2 years, they need to take some noticeable steps too. The offensive line, I think, will be much improved. They added Keyshawn Blackstock from the junior college rankings and a couple of true freshmen who aren't likely to play this year. But overall, they also bring back, I think, 5 guys who started at least 2 games last year. And then the younger guys behind them who were on the team last year playing on the scout team and practicing, they're all more experienced. I know that Coach Cap feels a lot better about the offensive line this year. They talked about it during a spring media availability session about, last year during the spring, they had like 7 offensive linemen available because of all the injuries and stuff. 2 of those were converted defensive linemen just to have bodies. And, he said like something like this year is a breath of fresh air. It wasn't during the spring because they had like 2 or 3 different units that they were able to get, all these different 5-man groups in, keep everybody healthy, fresh. Everybody's getting more reps. Everybody's getting more experience. So a lot of the personnel on the offensive line is going to be many of the players we saw last year, but it seems like a lot of those players took a step up from where they were last year. Nick Samac and JD Duplain both returned, and they bring a lot of experience. So, I do expect that to take a noticeable step, and that should make the running game better too. You got 2 transfer running backs coming in with Jaron Mangum and Nate Carter, along with Jalen Berger returning, and a couple other guys back there. So, overall, I think that this team needs to at least win 6 games, make a bowl game, get kind of back on that trajectory of success. I think 6 wins should be like the lowest goal that. But I know within the program they have a lot higher expectations than that. And like I said, they have a chip on their shoulder. They're ready to prove people wrong. Nobody's talking about them. Nobody thinks that they're going to do well. But that is not the feeling within the building. And, I think that there might be some teams that they're going to shock and upset. But I also, I don't think this is going to be a 2021 type team that goes 11-2 and wins a New Year's Six Bowl. I think it's going to be somewhere in between the 2021 and 2022 teams. But a team that'll make a bowl game, that'll win its fair share of games, upset some people. But it also could be a team that drops a game that you don't expect it to. I think that there's a lot of mystery surrounding this team and how they'll perform. I think they're still looking to add a couple more people from the transfer portal. Add some talent there, so we'll see ultimately where it goes. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to judge right now. But that's kind of my take on this team is that they're not buying into the idea that they're defeated after these players transferred out, or that they don't have these high expectations from the national media, but they do have high expectations for themselves. And the standard is something that Mel Tucker always says. And that's something that I think is really going to ring true with this group. So I don't really have a prediction right now in terms of win and loss totals, but that's kind of my take right now, if that all makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the theme that I'm seeing overall is like positive, but maybe some realistic expectations. There's still some room for them to grow with personnel and kind of get the recruits in that they want right from the beginning and not always have to pull lots of different guys from the transfer portal. But I feel like what I've read and what you guys have all said from being at the spring game with Paul and Brendan last week, talking through that, and then now you being at the different media availabilities and stuff, there's definitely an air of positivity, and that the guys realize that it's necessary that they have to perform better than last year. And I think they have kind of taken that in stride. So I'm excited about football season. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel after the end of last football season, but I feel like they have made necessary strides and they're coming out with things that just give me a positive outlook of like, although this may be still a rebuild time, I think it's going to be more enjoyable than last season. So I agree with your takes.
Yeah, I think that all the players, all the coaches, everybody involved, they're ready to put the work in.
Mm-hmm.
How much that equates to wins and losses with their talent level on the roster versus the rest of the Big Ten. They have a brutal
Right.
schedule too, and playing in the Big Ten East is never easy. This is supposedly the last year of those divisions, so we'll see how they do. And then obviously Washington's coming to East Lansing too,
Yep.
which is better than having to travel to Washington like last year, but still, that was like a top 10 team last year that's returning a lot
Mm-hmm.
of talent, especially at the quarterback and wide receiver positions that tore up Michigan State last year with Michael Penix Jr. and
Yeah.
those receivers that they got. Oh, and they added Jeremy Bernard too, who transferred out
Mm-hmm.
of state. So
Yep.
that's that's going to be a tough game, but MSU does have the advantage in that one of playing at home. So
Yeah.
we'll see how they
More
make
so than
a schedule.
last go around. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Okay, we touched on it briefly at the beginning of this conversation, but talk to me a little bit about official visits that are coming up and some guys that maybe we should look out for their names a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So the official visits are going to start in June for Michigan State. That first weekend of June, they're hosting several guys. Syair Torrence is a defensive back who just recently decommitted from Syracuse, which likely bodes well for the Spartans because right after he got the offer from Michigan State, he set up an official visit and decommitted from there. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, regarding to if he's going to commit to Michigan State or not. But I think that they have a really good chance with him on his official visit to kind of, get him to commit if that's what they want to do, and and if he wants to do it too. And then you got several other guys that weekend, like wide receiver Jordan Ross, tight end Eric Carner, and defensive back athlete Justin Denson. Justin is a kid who I talk to a lot, and he's gotten a lot of college attention lately. His offer list has exploded, but I know that he's very high on Michigan State, and they're very high on him. He's kind of a defensive back with the skill set of a wide receiver, so he is very versatile, and yeah, he's got really good ball skills and coverage skills, and he can kind of do whatever you want. Also Jalen Thompson is going to be there that weekend. Michigan State 4-star DB commit. Jalen's another kid who I talk to quite often. I just recently saw him in Cincinnati at the Rivals camp. And he's a very talented player. So there are still a lot of programs out there who are trying to get him to come on official visits too, and trying to flip him. But he's really locked in with the Spartans right now. He's a great kid, a really long and talented defensive back who is, I think has all the makings of a really good cornerback at the college level, and I think he's going to be a really good get for Michigan State. And then Mario Buford is another cornerback who's visiting that weekend. Who he's from down in Texas, and he was at Rivals Camp Dallas last week, and he said, Michigan State is a front runner in his recruitment right now. So he's another one to watch, another really talented defensive back. And there are several others visiting that weekend, like Rydarius Morgan and a few more. Kind Daniels is a running back who I believe is committed to Florida right now, but Michigan State's getting him for an official visit that weekend. Um, and a few other guys that weekend too. And then the June 9th through June 11th weekend, there were some pretty big names that weekend. Dylan Williams is a linebacker from California who he visited Michigan State for the spring game, I believe. He's a 4-star kid, um, really good player. Would be a significant linebacker recruit. Nathan Royce visiting that weekend. He's an offensive tackle. He's plays his high school ball in Wisconsin right now. He's a really good tackle looking prospect. Um, Jarvis Green is a kid from North Carolina. He was at the Rivals camp in Atlanta. Kevin Knight was down there talking to him. His tape I get really excited about because he's like just super fast, like a playmaker. Um, would love to see Michigan State add him to the fold, but I know North Carolina. He's from North Carolina. They're in the mix in a lot of other schools, so he's got a lot of options, and he's a really good player that kind of jumps off the tape to me. Jamari Howard's another Michigan State commit. He's going to be there that June 9th through June 11th weekend. He told me that's another kid committed to Michigan State right now who, but a lot of teams are after him, especially like his in-state schools, like Florida State and I think Miami and stuff. So that visit is going to be really important for Michigan State to kind of reaffirm his commitment. He's still locked in with the Spartans right now, but you never know what could happen in this day and age. So getting him to campus and making sure that he's all set with everything, he's good with everything. That's going to be really important that weekend. A couple other guys coming that weekend too. Then the June 23rd through June 25th weekend, that's another big one of official visitors. The biggest name is probably Nick Marsh, 4-star wide receiver, formerly committed to Michigan State. He's an in-state kid. I talked to him in Cincinnati too, and I was really, not only impressed with how like his skills on the football field. He was one of the most dominant players at that camp, but just how honest and mature he is. And, he was very candid with me about his decision to decommit from Michigan State. But at the same time, he was also, I thought he was very genuine and honest that his interest is still very high in Michigan State. He's still in contact with them all the time. He just wanted to take advantage of seeing other schools, seeing other places, seeing what they had to offer, making sure that he was in the best decision for him. So if maybe he committed a little too early, so he, didn't want to disrespect the coaching staff by taking these other visits and stuff like that. And, there are other schools who are very on him too, like Penn State and Auburn and some other ones that he's going to take official visits to. But Michigan State's getting the last official visit from him before he commits, I think on July 7th. So that's pretty significant. And it's rare when a kid decommits and then recommits and ultimately signs with that same school. So I don't know that that's going to happen. His mom is still very high on Michigan State, and he is too. But he's got to make the best decision for himself. So we'll see how that goes. Also visiting that weekend are the Nowinski twins. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but they're 2 offensive tackles from Ohio, and they're really good kids too. I talked to them in Cincinnati. They come from like a really unique background. They've only been playing football for like 2 years, but they used to be in the circus, riding unicycles, and doing all kinds of other stuff. Yeah, and then they grew up doing other sports like basketball and skiing and stuff, but football is new to them. And offensive line Coach Cap was a guy who identified their talent early, and what's big to them is that Michigan State really wants both of them in their program, not just one of them. And that's key to them. Those are 2 players who have potential off the charts because, like I said, they're still very new to football. And also that weekend you got wide receiver Tremar Harris, running backs Jason Brown and Anthony Carey, safety Jason Cross. So pretty much every single one of those weekends, there's a lot of talent that Michigan State wants to add to the roster. You never know how many of those kids are going to end up committing or going elsewhere. A lot of those players have a lot of options, a lot of offers, but these official visits are really important for ultimately, getting kids to commit to you or putting yourself in position to get that later. So a lot going on.
A question that I thought of when you were kind of listing those things out, when you talked about, the people that have committed, but you have to make sure that like other schools, or other schools are still talking to them after they have already committed. Is that something that has always happened and I just haven't known that? Or is that something that's come with kind of this new era of the way that recruiting and stuff goes nowadays?
Kids have always, when you're verbally committed, it doesn't actually mean anything,
Yeah.
right? You haven't
Okay.
signed anything, you're not locked into anything. So other schools, a lot even before NIL and stuff, have gone through and flipped.
Okay.
Michigan State's done it
Mm-hmm.
too. Like Noah Kim was one time committed to Virginia Tech
Mm-hmm.
before he ultimately committed to Michigan State. Keon Coleman was committed to Kansas and then later Michigan State. So a lot of the times I think some coaches might ask, like, I know you're committed here. Is it okay if we still recruit you, talk to you? Or some may take a more aggressive approach. But, I think it's definitely heightened now with NIL because now these programs can, the coaches can't say directly, but people connected to the program and stuff can tell them, we'll drop, we're going to give you more money than this school's going to give you, we'll give you this, that, and that, and promise you whatever. So it's definitely heightened, but, recruiting kids who are committed, flipping kids who are committed, that's always been a thing.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so I feel like that was a really comprehensive rundown of kind of what's coming up in June, and I'm sure that you will be covering that on Spartans Illustrated and putting out tons of information as those, weekend visits get going. So, if you're interested in finding out more, check out Spartans Illustrated again for more of Ryan's coverage on that kind of recruiting path. Last question for you, Ryan. You've covered a lot of games. You and I have covered, I think, a couple games together at this point, but um, football and basketball. What are your favorite games ever that you've covered? Just to kind of round out our episode here.
For football, I'd say it was the first game of the 2021 season at Northwestern, the Kenneth Walker game. Going into that year, as we talked about earlier, Michigan State was coming off of a 2020 season where they won like two games. It was a shortened season, um, but they were like 2-5 or whatever. So going into 2021, expectations were pretty low. At the time, it was still pre COVID protocols, so there wasn't a lot of access to um, to practices and stuff like that. There was some, but there was chatter that Kenneth Walker was a good player, and that he was going to be the starter and whatever. But the very first play of that game, he took the ball 75 yards for a touchdown, and then he just dominated the rest of the game. He scored like 4 touchdowns or whatever it was, and that was just so incredible to watch because it was just the very beginning chapter of what was to come that season for Kenneth Walker, um, and that was also the first road game that I had ever covered, I believe, in a different state.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just a fun trip too, and I really
Yeah.
enjoyed Western's campus and checking out Chicago and Evanston, and I just
Mm-hmm.
it was just a incredible game to watch, a fun trip in general. So that one's always
Yeah.
memorable to me. For
Definitely.
basketball, that one's very easy for me. It was the Marquette game and even the USC game too in Columbus for the NCAA tournament because this year was the first year I got to cover an NCAA tournament, and I was glad that they got placed in Columbus because it was a 3-hour drive or whatever, and
Easy. Yeah.
yeah, and I was courtside for both games, and that was just incredible view. The energy in that building, the energy from Michigan State's bench, being that close to their bench and hearing the different calls coming from the coaching staff and how things are communicated and things like that was just like a very eye-opening experience to how what actually happens during these games because a lot of the times during the regular season we're up on that platform
Yeah.
not as close to the action, not as close to the coaching staff or the bench, just to see how those players interacted with each other, the energy that they brought, the energy that the fans brought, um, and advancing through, to the Sweet 16, winning both of those games against, two very good teams, especially a Marquette team that was, the Big East champion and whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
they were, it was just really an incredible experience that, I'm always going to cherish as being there and being able to see that and witness that and see, and after that Marquette game, just like the pure joy on like, Madi Sissoko and Malik Hall and some of the other
Mm-hmm.
players came right up to where I was sitting and to kind of like, interact with the crowd and everybody getting loud and the crowd chanting Joey Hauser's name after everything he been
Yeah.
through as a player. That was, just really cool moment, really cool experience. So
Yeah. Well, both of those moments, I mean, you have worked very hard to get our site, and even when we worked for the Only Colors before, to a level that we could be respected enough to go to those games and get passes and stuff. And so it's only right that you get to experience some of those kind of once in a lifetime things because you have worked so hard. So
appreciate
super good picks. Yeah, I can't imagine watching Kenneth Walker just like run the ball down like that. I imagine everyone in the box was like, what, like blown away. Yeah,
Yeah, a
I
lot.
wish I could have been a fly on the wall to hear like what Solari and all of those guys had to say in that moment.
I think a lot of the commentary was, well, that's one way to start a game. So,
Right, right. Well, thanks so much for coming on today, Ryan. I appreciate your time always. I will not be on next week, going on a little vacation, so there won't be any Red Cedar Radar next week, but then I'll be back the following week and I have some exciting stuff planned for the future. So, not next week, but I'll be back soon. Thanks again, Ryan. And if you haven't already subscribed to Red Cedar Radar, follow us on YouTube and listen wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much. Bye.